What if the biggest thing we see every day, the sky, isn't quite what we think it is? Today, we're going to dive into a really beautiful sermon that invites us to find a whole new meaning just by looking up. So, the sermon starts with this really simple but kind of mind-bending question. Have you ever thought of the sky not as the space above us, but as the space between? It sounds like a tiny change, but as we're about to see, it changes everything. And this whole idea, which might sound a bit strange at first, actually comes from the very first pages of the Bible, from Genesis. This one verse is the foundation for the whole sermon. It defines the sky not as some distant ceiling, but as this great separator, created right in the midst of a world made of water. Right, so the invitation here isn't just to hear an old story. It's to see our world, right now, in a completely fresh way, as a world that's held between two waters. Okay, so here's the key difference. We tend to look up and see the sky as this huge empty space above our heads, right? Reaching all the way to the stars. But Genesis has a very different take. It says the sky is the space between the waters up in the clouds and the waters down in the oceans. The sky actually exists within the water. And that really reframes how you think about it, doesn't it? The sermon points out that in this picture, water is the foundational element for all of life. And that makes sense, right? I mean, our own bodies are about 60% water. So in this view, the sky is this special space that was carved out specifically for life to flourish, held safely between these two incredible sources of life. Now, what's really interesting is that the Bible calls this expanse heaven. And as the sermon unpacks, that one little word holds so many layers of meaning, way more than you might think at first. It's actually pretty fascinating. The Bible uses that same word, heaven, for three very different things. First, you've got the atmosphere, the air right above us, what the Tower of Babel was trying to reach. Then, it's also the cosmos, outer space, where Abraham was told to count the stars. And finally, it's the divine realm, the spiritual place where God resides. You see, for the ancient writers, pretty much anything that was beyond their immediate grasp was just heaven. And this verse from Isaiah just captures that idea perfectly. The sermon's point is this. Just like people back then couldn't possibly understand the true scale of the cosmos, that unimaginable distance between the clouds and the stars, we often have the same struggle trying to grasp the infinite depth of God's love. What we understand is really just the surface of something so much deeper. So the sermon then brings us right back down from those cosmic heights to the physical sky that's all around us, and it describes it so beautifully as a place of life. It's called an environment of grace. Think about it. This incredibly thin layer of air that wraps around our whole planet, held between those waters, it's not empty, not at all. It's this carefully designed space where literally everything we need is provided, making all of life possible. Just think about the air you're breathing right now, in this moment. It seems like nothing, right? But it's packed with all these invisible gifts. There's water vapor in there, protecting us from getting too dry. There's nitrogen, which is essential for plants to grow. And of course, there's the oxygen that's filling your lungs as we speak. It's this perfect, life-giving mix that we move through every single day, and most of the time, we don't even give it a second thought. And this is where the sermon draws such a beautiful parallel. This invisible, life-giving air we're in, it's like a perfect reflection of God's presence. It's everywhere, it's absolutely essential for us to exist, and yet it's so often unfelt and so often just taken for granted. But the sermon also recognizes something very human about us. We have a hard time believing in or even just remembering the things we can't see. The love that's shown in creation is so gentle, so quiet. It's in every single breath we take, in every drop of rain. It's always there. And because it's always there, it's just so easy to forget. And so, because we're so good at forgetting the unseen, the sermon says that this very same love, it was also made visible for us. This is where Jesus comes into the story. The sermon explains that he came down from that spiritual heaven to our earth to make God's love something we could actually touch and feel. He's described not as something invisible like the air, but as something real and physical, like life-giving bread. The whole point, the sermon explains, was to restore that loving connection between us and God, a connection that had been broken. Jesus made the infinite, invisible love of the Creator into something we could actually see in a person's face and hear in a person's voice. So, knowing all of this, the sermon doesn't end with a list of rules or some big demand. Instead, it ends with a very simple, very gentle, but profound invitation. And the invitation is just this: to live inside that love, to remain in it, to abide in it. And this is the very same love that created the sky, the same love that fills the air you're breathing, and the same love we saw in Jesus. It's really an invitation to see your whole life as taking place inside this incredible gift. And that's where the sermon leaves us, with this gentle question to take with us. What would it mean to live inside a gift? What might change if we started to see every moment, every single breath, as living inside of something wonderful? What does it mean to consciously stay in the love that holds all of this together? Something to think about. Thank you for exploring this with me.